had, I think,
save me a little cash.
If you had proper air movement to where you're actually reducing the boundary layer properly, because there's a static layer that's around the edge of the leaves, right? And it's not anything you can see, but it's just a static layer that it needs to kind of be disrupted a little bit to make gas exchange easier, right? So if that boundary layer is reduced by proper air movement and it has good air exchange and your plant isn't too dry, keep in mind, if your plant's too dry, it's literally going to...
The respiration's got to be there.
Exactly. It's going to shut the stomata down so you don't have water movement through it. And if you have no water movement through it, you have no...
We're Jug Dealers, we're the podcast you need in your feed. Teaching the game like you never seen. Jerin, Gabe, GRAMBO, true OGs. Masters of the globe, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the dead is green. We set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis and lifestyle related. Brought to you by the good people at 5A, and as always, available at jugdealers.net and jugdealers.shop.
.shop, indeed. You can also get samples there at jugdealers.net/samples. You can fill out the growers form and then request it, and believe it or not, you will hear from one of us.
Yeah.
Just as a thank you, and
I'm
also
getting
making
a little
sure
caught up because I was on the road, but yeah,
we're definitely getting there. But I do like the system that we have for samples at this point.
Yep.
You can also hit the bookings page as well if you want to request our presence at either a shop, a grow, an event, a cup, anything like that. We're back again, and we're excited to crack in.
Yeah.
I think we're really looking at taking a little bit more of a microscope at some of these issues we've talked about, right? We've talked about nutrients. We talk about, the different gases in the air and their interactions. We talked about photosynthesis and things. We've talked about insects, but like now it's like, let's like pull that in a little bit closer, right?
I think, to really, I think in any garden, the way to really separate yourself from anybody else is to really focus in on the minutia. And this is one of those things where I think, you've mentioned it a lot of times where you think people, and you're right, by the way, where you're like people, they focus on that first.
Right.
Whereas now that we're going into the microscope, we're deep in there, and this is when everything else is really banging.
Right.
This is when you put it full throttle.
When bigger picture is working out, then you can actually start delving into this stuff a little bit more. And of course, I always like to say, we're just plant janitors. Let a plant be a plant. Let a plant grow. We're not really growers. But today specifically, we're going to talk about CO2 and specifically CO2 involved with plant growth in general. With C3 plants, but obviously specifically with our plant cannabis, and really how it relates. We're going to talk a little bit about the science, the benefits, the application, and even more, and probably most importantly,
the mistakes,
right. We will see some visual comparisons, things like that, because we like to talk about it, but then also with our illustrious man behind the glasses, I like to call
Pictures
him.
Are worth
He helps
words.
us keep those visuals as well. GRAMBO, the third man, and not the third wheel, but the trifecta, the third amigo to this Jug Dealer thing we got going on here. And then last but not least, we're just going to really set an educational and practical tone so that you guys, as is always our goal, you can shut the computer off, you can turn the food off, you can do whatever, and then you can actually apply it in your grow room.
Dude, stage one science.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the science.
Let's talk about
CO2 and photosynthesis, bro.
Let's talk about
Dive right in, bro. So plants use CO2 and photosynthesis. It creates sugars. Photosynthesis. It creates sugar. It creates sugars and energy. Really, really, really simple. Cannabis is a C3 plant. You love to point that out.
Well, and just very, very quickly, without going down this wormhole, what C3 plant means.
You love to go.
It just means that the first carbon, the first sugar in carbon that's created is a 3-carbon sugar. So that's why it's C3. There's also C4 plants, but that's like grasses, corn. Those are monocots, basically.
Monocots, so that's single.
Yeah.
Grasses.
Exactly,
and
grasses and things like that, right?
Yeah, science.
Science here, and then you actually have cam plants as well, but that's desert plants. So they actually sequester. They don't leave their stomata open during the day. They actually collect all the CO2, and then at night, they'll open up and actually do everything they need to do. So they're unique in that way, and that's obviously all
why we
about.
Bring the college boy.
Yeah, it's all about water preservation. But anyhow, that's not what we're talking about today. Maybe someday we'll talk cacti. All right.
What's the natural atmospheric ppm?
So, and this is not a coincidence.
Where do they take the measurement? They take it in Hawaii, as I remember.
Yeah, something. There's a specific height that it's taken. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
There's actual parameters to it, but it's right around 420 ppm.
Which is crazy. That's just ambient CO2. It's funny because, I've had a friend back east who's growing in the woods, and he hits me up and he's like, it's like 1100 ambient in my, my grow space.
I believe it.
And
well, depending on what kind of airflow you have in and out.
Forest, like in the forest.
Dude, shit's cranking. And that's the other thing, we talk about. Everybody wants to talk about, plants give off oxygen. Yes, they do. But they also give off CO2. It's just that the ratio versus it's more oxygen compared to CO2. So overall, if you look at the equation, it's more oxygen. But that's why terrarium works. And I know that we even have, some different things that we, want to talk about we've got a lot of actually good episodes. We've been spinning up some good stuff.
What's the ideal? What do you think is the ideal range for ambient CO2 to really have plants thrive and push hard?
Here's the thing. The reality is, if you look in the climatological record, 400 ppm, even though a lot of people think that's super high, or 420 or whatever it is right around, it's been much higher. Humans and animals have survived, and plants have survived in a situation where it was higher atmospheric CO2. And if I'm correct, and GRAMBO can look this up, in the atmosphere, the total amount of CO2 is only like 0.4% or something like that. Might even be 0.04, but it's very, very low, right? So you're talking about, splitting hairs when it even talks, anyway, that's kind of a whole different story.
And this is for reality is this for the indoor guy who's really trying to boost yields, understanding too, it's 45% of the plant is carbon.
Well, yeah. But it also gets it from,
other places.
Yeah, it gets from other places. But yes, but carbon, I mean, again, there's your organic, non-organic. I mean, just as literally.
It's go ahead, Graham, easy.
0.4%.
So I was right.
No, 0.0.
So I was 0.04.
0.04.
So 0.04. So I was right in my second thing. So 0.04. So let's say we cut that in half. We're at 0.02.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, it would be 0.008. No way.
0.008.
Anyway, whatever. Point is, it's not much. But, plants have existed in a situation, which is one of the reasons why I think even maybe the dinosaur age, that kind of thing, where it probably was like a higher.
I do say PPM, I'm making my rooms Jurassic when I do that. But here's a couple things. And, you talk about Liebig all the time and the increased law of minimums.
But before I get to that, I do want to say that, obviously, typically people are putting ideal for cannabis at 1,000 to 1,500. The reality is the only reason that is that's oversaturation. If you look into the science, a C3 plant flattens out at about 700 to 800 ppm, where the return on investment becomes nil.
Negligible.
Yeah, exactly. It just flattens out on the curve. So the only reason I believe you do 1,000 to 1,500.
I'm happy to use 800.
Well, and if you had, I think,
save me a little cash.
If you had proper air movement to where you're actually reducing the boundary layer properly, because there's a static layer that's around the edge of the leaves, right? And it's not anything you can see, but it's just a static layer that it needs to kind of be disrupted a little bit to make gas exchange easier, right? So, to me, I think it's just about making sure that there's, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 right there, because the plant's also not sucking it in, right? The stomata are open, just kind of bouncing around. It's like, so if that boundary layer is reduced by proper air movement and it has good air exchange and your plant isn't too dry, keep in mind, if your plant's too dry, it's literally going to...
The respiration's got to be there.
Exactly. It's going to shut the stomata down so you don't have water movement through it. And if you have no water movement through it, you have no nutrient uptake. Like plants don't even drink water. Water passes through the system.
We were talking about this before the show with calcium. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, when you look and you go, well, how big a dehumidifier do you need? Well, how much water do you use? 100 gallons a day? Well, you need 100 gallons a day of water pulled out. Like that's just the reality.
It was, it's funny. We had a facility with Grassroots in Illinois, and what they would pump through the room, they'd have 250 gallons out on the side of the building by the end of the day. It's like, where the hell does this go?
So, and now going back to your point on Liebig's Law of Minimum, which I love, and we've done a whole show on it even. I don't remember. God, that was a while back, wasn't it, Graham? That was like, I don't know, first 10 shows or something maybe. But anyway, too many people, and even going back to the grow shop days, man, too many people would come in and literally go, hey, I'm looking for a tank and a regulator. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, how's everything going? They're like, oh, I'm just getting started. Oh, well, sit down, laddie. You are starting at the wrong end.
If you're cranking high CO2 and you haven't figured the rest of it out, that's like putting a turbocharger on a car that's 500 horsepower
and with shit tires.
And you've never driven a car. You know what I mean? Like let's get used to driving a 500 horsepower car first.
But you know. And I used to always tell people the reality is increased CO2 only helps if all other factors, light, temperature, nutrients, all are optimal.
You're adamant, and you're right.
And
you're absolutely right.
And that's where Liebig's law of the minimum. So you're on, GRAMBO. Let's pull up that graphic on Liebig's just to show that, you know, and then I'll read the actual specific. Good. So this is, you know, the visual representation showing that, you know, your maximum is actually only performing to your minimum, right? And it's a weird concept at first, but if you really think about it, it's like that's the whole optimal thing. So everything has to be up at these optimal levels to be able to really even think about anything else.
Temperature, humidity, lighting,
absolutely.
All those
PPFD,
things
all
need to
those
be
kind of
dialed.
things. And in fact, would you click over to the actual definition there, if you don't mind, GRAMBO?
Your feeds.
Feeds, like everything is a part of it. But
all those things.
And of course, it comes from Justice von Liebig, but it states that growth is dictated.
You love this guy.
I do.
And you should. We all should.
Growth is dictated not by total resources available, but by the scarcest resource, the scarcest one. So you're performing to your scarcest resource. So it's a weird thing to think about, but that is the limiting factor.
If it's iron.
Right. It doesn't matter what it is. That's the limiting factor. The law has also been applied to other biological populations, ecosystem models for factors such as sunlight or mineral nutrients as well. We do like to talk about Liebig's law of the minimum, even with that graphic that he alluded to really specifically, you know, from a nutrient aspect. You can see sulfur, potassium, phosphorus, zinc. That's really looking at it from a nutrient aspect. But it really applies overall.
What you're saying is focus on everything else.
Hey, everybody. Didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but did want to remind you that anything we talk about that are our products, you can find at jugdealers.shop 24/7 online. Go and get it. Support us. Help us continue doing what we're doing. Jugdealers.shop. Thanks a bunch. Now back to the show.
Focus on everything else.
Besides,
get that dialed.
Yes.
And then once all that is dialed, then focus on CO2. It's funny you say that too, because, you know, I've been away, and so I haven't focused on CO2 primarily because I've just been like, hey, let's just chill everything out, keep it low key, you know what I mean? But understand, you know, you can control your plants like that.
Well, why don't we even give them some parameters that really, you know, what are these optimums,
So,
Gabe?
you know, lighting intensity, you know, if you're in veg, somewhere in the 500 to 800, it just depends on where you're at with it. Post veg in flower 800, 1,000. You know, I really don't like much more. I don't think
you need much more than that. Again, from what I see,
at that point, you know, you're just getting a little bit crazy. Temperatures. If you're running HPSs, I like it at 78 degrees. If you're running LEDs, I really enjoy the 83, 84.
Preach.
We are actually going to have one of our compadres from Holland who's actually done some trials with the university, and he's going to talk about all these parameters, which we're really excited to have him on. Humidity and VPD are balanced, you know, and not only are they balanced, you know, you want to keep them, for me, I like keeping them 60% until pretty much the week 6.
Until the very end. Yeah.
You know, and this way, you know, the biggest thing you got to remember with having that humidity high is those stomata are staying nice and open.
Well, that's
plants
the point.
That's really.
And I know for people that's a little bit counterintuitive, but if the humidity goes too low, then the plant starts closing up because really one of its biggest things is water preservation, right? So it's just, you can't choke it out. It's just gonna, and then once those cork up, transpiration stops, everything stops. It's over, right? Because if you don't have the building blocks flowing through, how do you build?
Again, you know? and I, you know, it's something, like I said, something I really respect about having worked with Jayhawk for a couple of years now, as you always point out, calcium is taken up in the transpiration stream. And literally, I think a lot of people misdiagnose calcium deficiency because they're not pushing enough water through the plant.
Well, and that even goes back to, you know, diagnosing on symptoms versus signs, right? Again, we have another episode we've done. Not for nothing on that. If you're pushing CO2, then you're actually exacerbating that problem. Sure.
Because you
You're
haven't
throwing
got
off the balance.
Yeah,
and
you
everything
haven't
else,
gotten it all dialed. So
now, here's one thing I do like to mention about VPD. Use VPD not as a religion, but as a guide.
Yep.
Because
you're adamant about that.
I was super adamant about
you know,
that.
it's funny you say that because I was like, I can't believe he's talking about it and he hasn't said anything. Then literally,
it's one of my little like
right back in
things,
there, he's like, I do need to give my caveat.
It's not about your room temperature, nor even the leaf surface temperature. It's about the internal temperatures.
Well,
right?
that's a critical spot that we're missing. So even if you have like a machine that's asking or that's able to calculate VPD on some level, it's not this high level instrumentation. So it'll even ask you, well, what's the offset of the internal leaf temperature? Is it -3 degrees? Is it -2 degrees?
Right,
How the hell do
right.
I know? Even if I've got the little pizza the laser thing, man, that's leaf surface temperature, like Josh is saying. So if you know an average, but again, now are you HPS or you LED? Like there's so many. Is there infrared? Is there not infrared? Like, thank you, Josh. That is it's definitely. Well, he really threw me a softball there.
Also, you know, it's kind of cool. I was just doing some CO2 searching on Google, and you know what Google recommends as one of the videos to watch? A Jug Dealers video.
Really?
Yeah, that's not a plant.
That's
I
awesome,
Googled
dude.
CO2 enrichment in cannabis, and it said you might enjoy
ScienceDirect.com. What is this?
I don't know.
Oh man, we're getting put right next to some.
Whoa.
You guys are doing it, boys.
We're doing it. All right.
Shout out to the Jug
So,
Dealers.
all right. So anyway, VPD is a guide. And if you think about it conceptually, it makes sense. You keep your humidity levels high enough so the stomata stay open, so the transpiration keeps rocking, so that you keep nutrients rolling through. So everything is in that homeostatic balance, right? But also remember that nutrients also need to be adequately applied as part of this, making sure that your minimums or your limiting factors are addressed, right? All these being limiting factors.
You're going to go to the gym and train. You got to feed, right?
You gotta have your protein. You gotta have everything else, right? So once these base things, which there's actually more, but in a nutshell, once these base things are done, then we can look at CO2. Okay. So some of these things,
you and I do. You are adamantly like FVPD.
Yeah, kind of.
I believe that and I think you kind of live in the same world as me, where our crop should have its own VPD scale.
That's exactly it.
I don't think you're wrong there.
I don't think we have the right scale.
I think we live by someone else's
and
scale.
there's without dropping his name, but an associate of this company, a very good friend of the company, who's been running our gear for a long time and has worked in a variety of situations here. You obviously know who he is. He had a very high level horticultural guy come into a greenhouse setup where they were growing our plant, and they were able to have every parameter on point. The dude, I want to say, was a lettuce grower or something like that. And our guy was like, look, I've never grown more product in my life, but it was hemp. Because it just, the VPD schedule that they were able to set it right on. Yeah. So to your point, it's not that it wasn't a VPD schedule that worked on something else. But again, you can go get like Knott's vegetable handbook, and it's going to tell you, this is EEC. This is what you put.
Yeah.
You need it for any plant. It's a standardized thing but we don't have that.
Well, and I think that's because there's so much diversity in our crop still.
Yes.
You know
yes.
what I mean?
And that's remember how we talk every discussion we ever have, whether it's with you and me or anybody else, blah, 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 or our boy Dana Niche. And it literally always comes down to strain specificity.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. Strain specificity.
I have my own cut of Uishi. It's equally unique, but it's different than Dane's for sure.
Yeah.
Dude.
So obviously a couple of the places that once you have these things put together, sealed rooms, sealed tents, having high performance LED lighting where you're actually able to run at those higher temperatures. So that's where LED and CO2 in my mind do kind of couple well together, right? Sometimes, running HPS and CO2 together, it always felt like it was a little on the warm side. But with LED, it feels like it's right where you want it to be.
But think about it, warmer, more, generally the stomata are going to be open a little bit more.
Well, and there's a higher metabolism, higher transpiration rate. I mean, it's all.
Fortunately, the biggest gardens that I've run have been down at sea level, so it definitely makes it. But those plants are just like,
right.
I mean, they are breathing.
So obviously, if you don't have enough light, you're wasting CO2. If any of those parameters aren't together, you're wasting CO2. If you've got just passive air exchange where you're rotating out, you're wasting CO2. So that's one of the reasons why I personally, I never really worried about CO2 enrichment, because any time of the year that I can circulate, I'm just dumping. We're in Colorado. I'm dumping in cold air, right? And I'm using that to just stay at our beautiful ambient. Otherwise, it's like it's in a basement. It's in a basement that I had an office in. again, there was, I was talking plenty of hot air down there to, to keep it all rolling. But again, look at that. I like that. Looky there. Look, always finding the nice graphics. But my whole thing was always like, I never felt like I had the situation to actually properly use it. And that's just, and that's just what I feel like. Even with a well put together room where I pump out some fantastic product, for me, it was always like, Well,
and I can tell you from my own, personal space, like you really got to have it sealed. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's something where I think,
well, here's the big,
it costs money.
It costs money. And I think the biggest thing is, I don't know why. I do not know why, but for some reason, CO2 became looked at as like a silver bullet or a fix all.
Right.
And it's just like, dude, it's a performance enhancer. It's nitrous on top of a fast car already. Mm-hmm. That's dialed in. That's been dyno or whatever that, you know what I mean? That's what it is.
Fuel on the fire there.
That's what it is. But it's not, dude, I need to get down the track a little bit faster. Fuck it. Start with nitrous. That's not, you don't start with nitrous.
That's a good point. Like I put nitrous on my Prius and now I'm entering the races, boys.
Like, hey, the car's not ready for that.
So now here's another thing that I think is really interesting too. When you talk about living soil beds and microbial interactions too, right? Because not only does a plant have this respiration, this photosynthesis and respiration and an exchange of CO2 and oxygen and everything else. Well, believe it or not, a lot of that microbes are doing that too. Microbes, they're releasing gases and things like that. And that's also one of the reasons why you have to have dry backs, right? Because if you think about it, if it's wet all the time, everything's going to drown, right? But if you have this, like if the water goes down, and it's literally pulling air down into the rhizosphere, right? So you just kind of imagine that as it dries out, right? And at the end of the day, quite frankly, soil microbes release CO2 as they break down organic material. That's one of the things that's going on. So that's a very symbiotic relationship. Understand for every yin, there's a yang in nature, right? It's all figured out.
Hey, man, we're not anti-living soil. In fact,
no, God, no.
I'm plug. So straight up, we've been giving a lot of living soil guys Carbonaria, the winter,
Carbo Ruby winter, really the trifecta, the trilogy.
And I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a living soil guy who hasn't got back to me and said, "Hey, this stuff really made a difference. I'm going to come down to the warehouse. I'm going to buy some." So straight up, I'm telling you right now, it does make a difference, and it's not going to damage your soil.
No. That's the other thing. It's not going to damage microbes. It's not going to not be. You can continue to reuse it. Everything's basically organic. There's almost no actual nutrient charge. Molasses is just a long sugar chain that a lot of energy has to be put into it. So much better to go with carbo. There's 20 different direct plant extracted sugars out of that. So when you've got these things, and when you're actually creating a wonderful microbial situation, well, then you actually get these living soil systems, which actually create CO2 at the root zone.
I had to do it.
You know what I mean? So but again, things like worm mints, compost seeds, fermented inputs, all of these increase microbial respiration. So even if you think about like the carbo, it's almost like kind of like a fermented sugar, or in a way, even though we don't ferment it.
I mean, a fulvic acid too.
Well, yeah.
Carbon in there, baby.
Oh, there's plenty. There's plenty. Obviously, no bill. There's the Ruby Full, the full Vic, not full shit. By the way, everybody, just throwing that out there. Just so you know.
Why?
Well, it's supposed to I don't know, and I should have this memorized, but it's like increased percentages, increased ROI, and then increase yield or something like that.
Okay.
So there's something to the symbols. Plus, you can't that darn.
You need one of those. The more you know stars now. Those right here with the more you know.
Those regulatory agencies don't allow you to say certain things sometimes. So you know what I mean.
That's fulvic.
Yeah. So because of this microbial activity, of course, no-till beds can maintain elevated CO2 levels with zero supplementation. So that's pretty cool too. If you're actually in some of these situations, like even in a no-till situation in a greenhouse or something like that, you would absolutely go in there with elevated levels, well above the 400 ppm, which again, I do think that in certain scenarios or forested scenarios or things like that, where you could trap the CO2 in a little bit, which is why you do see additional plant performance above ambient. One, I think they've seen it historically in their lifetime, and two, there are natural situations that you see plants, in elevated CO2 situations that is not part of the Industrial Revolution or any bullshit like that. It'd be like in a forested scenario or something like that.
How are people going to implement CO2 into their gardens? We're going to talk about that. Some of the best ways, for me, At my place, I just got the normal tanks. They work fine.
Yeah, if they just
again, you got to have your place sealed.
You got your place sealed up decent. At least.
And for me here in Colorado, it's cheap enough. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to remind you that if you want to try any of the products that you see us talking about or using in our own gardens, go to jugdealers.shop. And now back to the show. It's cheap enough that, like, for me to run it around, maybe I'm spending $100.
But see, also, what's funny is to understand, though, like a terrarium works, right? So you could, if you had a sealed room, not put any CO2 in as well, and it's going to work.
I definitely see a difference.
Oh,
I 100% see a difference.
If you get everything up to those points, right, and everything's running optimal, you will see a difference.
I'm running 84. I'm running 60.
If you got the right tires and you've got the right gearing and everything, of course.
They dig it, but
throw the mattress on.
But I could definitely use a better sealed room. If you're in a commercial facility, I'm sure you guys already know this, but you guys are probably going to be using liquid tanks in which they'll come in 10, 20, 30 ton. I mean, those are,
and that's a different story for really anybody hobby. You could get
CO2 tank, man.
CO2 tanks,
generators also in commercial space, kind of greenhouses.
Greenhouses.
If you have a greenhouse that, they're definitely, liquid. I think they're liquid propane.
Yeah. And I mean,
LP gas.
And you can actually get a heat load out of that too, depending on where you're at. Like you can use CO2 burners to your advantage, depending on where you're at. Right.
I've seen them down at Durango Organics. They have them.
Oh yeah.
But even
mountains,
then,
for sure.
Even then, they're getting it in that 800. You're really,
but at the same time, not for really small grows.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. And not really for small grows. That's fine. Of course, there's the fermentation based setups like the mushroom bags and the exhale bags and some of these DIY sets. Yeah. I'm here to tell you, folks, I think all of them are a waste of time, basically.
You don't like them.
No, I don't.
I know this.
I don't.
I know this.
I've have some people that have sworn by it or whatever.
It's always grimy when like you open a tent and you just see one of those bags.
I couldn't. I've never.
Me personally, I'm just gonna say, if you're just gonna do it at home.
But here's the deal: have I seen it on a meter actually be reading? Yeah, I have. Here's the thing. Part of it for me is just. There's already enough shit hanging all over the place that I hated another thing hanging all over the place. Like, so really, I think that's a personal bias more than anything else. I do think they actually work. Some work much better than others. There's no question about that. They're low cost, they're low tech, and they are great for small tents. But I think the toughest part is when you get in that middle range where it's like a lot for a tank to take care of and not enough to put a burner in, right? So even like a 10 light room, something like that, dude, you're in a weird spot because that's going to be ripping through some tanks, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
So what do we know? It increases yield. We know this. Does it really increase terpenes and cannabinoid content?
Hold on, I do want to make one. Sorry. Lights on, folks.
Yeah.
Lights on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Don't run on when the lights are off.
It's not doing that.
Yeah. I actually it's funny you say that. I had someone ask me that. Has asked me that. Just someone I've connected with over the years. And don't run it at night. You're burning your money.
Yeah. Now, if it was a cam plant like we talked about at the beginning, that would be different.
But if you have the right setup, it's just
not our plant.
It's going to have a photo sensor on it. It's going to turn it off at night. So just.
But we do know if you've actually made CO2 the true limiting factor, meaning everything else is not the limiting factor. It's going to increase growth rate, no question, and it's going to increase yield, no question.
Yep.
Oh, back to her. Looky there. And you're just going to see your yield go down. Yield and quality go down as your limiting factors there. So if that was CO2 as it's pouring out and you actually brought it up because everything was running so good, you're going to see that yield and quality increase. Now, it doesn't necessarily directly increase terpene or cannabinoid content, so don't think it will. It's not going to make it strong or anything like that. And I actually think, one thing I will say is I actually think at times it'll create a little bit more plant matter. So I feel like for plant matter to oil for the ratio, I think non-CO2 herb, a lot of times you'll see a little bit less
biomass doesn't necessarily translate to higher cannabinoid.
Well, it's definitely it's not going to. Now, what it will is it's going to translate to higher yield.
You're saying you think it can actually water it down.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That is exact. And I've even had, and I was never a CO2 supplementer, and I've had people.
I could care less about big big.
No, I'm just saying this is just
grown big.
This is
I've grown
science.
This is the second time this week this has came
This
up.
is science,
Jeremy from Build a Soil said the exact same thing. He's like, I think it's watering down.
I mean,
you got a lot of more green and not a lot more
Don't
oil.
get me wrong.
I've had people call me out on my herb and be like, you don't use CO2.
But here's the thing.
Like straight up, just because they're so oily and small. That's funny. GRAMBO.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, that's funny.
With GMO, it's just so inherently big. But also you're going, I mean, for me, I'm going 70 days, 60, at least 65 days on it.
So now this,
and it's just like,
this begs,
it's just, and it's always 30.
And now here's a question.
THC.
What if you did 800 ppm instead of 1,000 to 1,500? And I'm just proposing.
That's what I did the last run.
That's what I'm proposing.
The last run, I'll be honest with you, the last run, that's what I did.
Or what if you just use it through veg just to, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just thinking off the home.
The last run I did use it in veg. Lately I hadn't been doing it just because we're doing some TC, in which, dude, we're going to have a really awesome TC guest on here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be actually pretty soon.
It's going to be absolutely awesome. We're excited to share some knowledge
for you terpenes, for you terpene freaks out there, understand that expression is much more limited to number one, genetics. Obviously, environmental stress, positive stresses like we like to talk about, things like winter frost, etc. Microbial activity, as we've been mentioning, and then of course nutrient profiles go into affect that as well, right? So things like sulfur being a part of aromatic rings or something like that, just as an example, right? Quality can absolutely still remain high with CO2. I believe. I just don't think, and this is my personal opinion, don't run it super high. I really do like more of that 800 range, right? But definitely keep your environment very controlled. If the environment's getting all out of whack, again, now the CO2 is not even really working. And then, as always, as we went through one of our best viewed shows, that drying and that cure is incredibly important, which, somebody actually asked me recently and sent me a couple of these. One was like the Lotus method and one was this other one. We're going to do a show on that because people are obviously interested in dry and cure. And these are a couple of methods I had never heard of. And I'm interested. I'm going to send you over the stuff, Gabe, and we're going to start peeling through it. Cause I'm like, dude, there's a whole show there. This is some crazy shit. One of them was like I think the Lotus is fridge cured. And then the other one is like doing it on VPD in the room. By day.
It's all about getting that water activity.
And
that's a big thing. I think
that's what was cool.
It's funny because I think a lot of people attribute the white ash to nutrients and a lot of stuff. And I'm not saying it's not a factor. I'm just saying I think it's a lot more in the cure. No, it is. And I don't think white ash is as much a determining factor as people think it is.
I don't think it is either. And
we've had that discussion.
In fact, I'm not even going to get drawn into that argument anymore. As far as advanced tips and integration.
One thing too, I was going to say, this is a tip I got from Green Dot Dave, probably at least 12 years ago. I've been working on getting him on the show. Hopefully we can make it happen. But he always said to turn off the CO2 the last, let's say 8 to 10 days.
Okay.
He would say that the CO2 was actually a heavier molecule and it would shred the terps. So historically for me, I've turned off my CO2 probably about 7 days out. So, I don't see any. That's just something that I've done historically, and not for nothing. If you're in a big facility, it is going to save you some money.
Yeah.
And also remember, when those guys are harvesting, if you're in a big facility, make sure to have that CO2 off. There's really no reason. They're going to have doors open and stuff like that. So just, if you haven't thought about it and you are in a larger facility, just remember to turn that CO2 off at the end of the cycle. Because again, you're going to have a lot of people in and out of those rooms.
So here, as a final segment here on CO2, let's just talk a little bit about some advanced tips and specifically integration as well, right?
Yep.
So obviously you're wanting to match the ppm, right? The parts per million CO2.
We're talking about taking it to the track, boys.
Yes, we are. Let's get her out. Let's get it on the. Let's get it on there. Let's roll. But matching that CO2 ppm to light intensity, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really one of the areas where those two things are really kind of coming together.
Top of the pyramid, bro.
Light and environment, right? So getting those to match together. You're wanting to adjust the nutrient inputs as well for faster plant metabolism.
Yep.
If they're eating faster and they're putting more water through there, they're going to be able to take more building blocks.
But not necessarily stacking. Just
No.
understanding that the feed needs to be equal to the growth of the plant.
Yeah. So, I mean, and even if, let's say you're running at 2.2 EC, you might need to run up to 2.4, 2.5.
Yeah, and that's,
like that.
by the way, for us and our nutrient
So
plants
even pull that back up real quick, Josh. So
that's the
again,
sweet spot.
you see that where that check, like that's where I really, I feel like is most practical is that 7,800. And again, within the scientific literature out there, that's kind of where they're saying it, which again, I think the only reason people go high is to oversaturate.
Leaving soil minimums. We're only the cars. Look, it's built to go this fast.
Yeah.
This is the fastest it will
that's
go.
That's a great.
It's never going to be.
I don't know where you pulled that up, but I like that. I like that, and it proves everything that I've read scientifically. Again, I think the only reason people oversaturate is just to make sure that it's 800 right there.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So anyway, obviously monitoring calcium, as we mentioned, calcium, magnesium, potassium levels, which because they're often in higher demand.
And the way the water is going to be flowing through the plant, it's definitely, it's very, very important because, again, law of minimums.
Right. And VPD should be recalculated or at least repaid attention to in running warmer temps with CO2. Again, use it as a guide. Don't use it as the Bible. The concepts are sound. I just don't think we have the right chart currently. That's what I would say. What does faster growth really allow for, though, Gabe?
More frequent pruning.
So get ready to work a little more.
Which is definitely, you're just going to have to stay on it. Faster training cycles and shorter veg times. So reality is use it in veg. If everything else is dialed, you're going to be able to shave some time off of getting those plants in, unless that's not what you're looking for.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If you're looking to slow that growth down, then don't do these things.
Well, here's the thing. That's a great point, though. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you right now, I have always had a space where I was on a razor thin edge on my veg space. I would have to run my LEDs at 25% because if I ran them at 100, I would grow it out.
Like, so, hey, I only cut one round of clones. For a lot of home growers we have in certain states, they're like, oh, I've got 2 months before I'm going to be putting these plants in. What am I going to do?
What do I do?
Hey, it takes 14 days to clone. Reality is slow it down a little bit, and what I would say at that is get them nice and rooted. Yeah. Get them transplanted. But then from there, you can easily, I run my stuff under a 315, and it's just enough that everything's happy. It's feeding all right.
But that's also one of the reasons why I never
giving it CO2.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I never really ran CO2. I was already outgrowing my space. I didn't feel like I needed. If I was in a warehouse or something and I had all that headspace and I had DEs 10 feet up in the air, giddy up. Giddy up. Okay. Don't forget also to combine with microbial inoculants, right? To also enhance that full soil synergy.
We're going to dive into that a little bit more too. We got some trichoderma episodes coming up, and we got some stuff. We really, again, Jayhawk and I are very adamantly against the hypochlorous because it does kill that stuff in the soil.
The synergy is gone. You're just taking it. It's not a system anymore.
And
it's not a
whatever.
System anymore.
I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it doesn't produce sexy flower, but it's just not the way we like to do things, and we like to have,
by the way, we don't do them perfect, but we do them all right.
No. And I like the synergy between, as you guys have kind of said, and I don't know who coined it, but the Synganics, you know what I mean? So
sure. Yeah.
I like that marriage of things.
Yeah. Key takeaways, Gabe. What do we got?
CO2 boosts growth, but it only works in ideal situations. So unless you have everything else dialed, don't go focus on
in that scenario. Before we completely wrap this up, Gabe, I was very fascinated. One time on my stream, you gave this analogy of a car, right? And it finally made me understand exactly what was going on. If you still have it fresh in your mind, could you tell Jug Dealers audience about that?
Well, an engine is pretty simple. It's fuel, it's combustion, it's air. So, and if any one of those three things is off, the car is just not,
it just won't run.
Right. And so it's all these things need to be ideal. And that's really what it comes down to. And if none of those things are ideal, if you have to lose any of them, CO2 is the one to lose,
right?
Because ultimately I'd rather lose that than have CO2 high and then watch my plant fall off because my nutrient was wrong.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, the only reason to ever use CO2 is it's truly your limiting factor. Keep that in mind. It's got to be your limiting factor. Again, never forget microbial life can. It is important. No, it is. It's essential. It's an essential part of the system. And again, remember that microbial life will enhance that natural CO2, and you can get a great microbial life in things like cocoa as well. Obviously, if you're going sterile, forget about it. Please make sure and evaluate your grow and see if CO2 is even for you. And I'm only doing that to help you save money.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like if it's not right, it's not right. And that's okay. You don't have to do it.
If you're starting to set up, don't focus on that. Get the tent, get the light, get the news.
So you're going to hear, all right. So
get the fans, get the monitors,
get the fans. Hey, GRAMBO, do you have maybe one question? We get so many questions.
We're not sponsored by anybody, by the way. So we're not going to shout out any like brands of tents or whatever,
Well, I don't have any proper fan questions lined up, but another thing that you guys blew my mind with was the concept of plant food isn't food. Nope. And when I learned that, this all comes back to CO2, where you want to talk about like what exactly that means. Why isn't plant food food? Well, and what is plant food then? If it's not food.
Light, the sun. I mean, that truly is. It's those 8 to 12 photons, those 8 to 12 packets of light that is fixed for every sugar, right? So it literally takes
the nutrients are more like vitamins, kind of.
Yeah, it's literally and that's again that light and synergy. They're talking about that CO2 and light synergy. 8 to 12 photons per CO2 fix. That CO2 is fixed into a sugar. Sugar is plant food. Everything else is just a building block to make a structure for a plant so that it can carry out these processes.
Yeah, that's what got us talking about it. The 45% carbon, 45% hydrogen. And then by the time you get to actual nitrogen and stuff,
where the hell's all this other stuff?
Everything else is 8%. It's 2%. And so much
like how without vitamin C will get scurvy. That's actually what you can grow plants without plant food, right? They'll just be anemic.
They don't need us. They don't.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What I'll leave you with is remember, they're autotrophs. We're heterotrophs. They make their own food. We have to seek our food out. Who's more highly evolved? You tell me. Thank you guys for coming out. You're going to hear some cool new episodes coming out. Auto flowers. We're going to do some trichoderma, maybe even something a little more specific on light spectrum, because we're going to have a very high level gentleman out of Holland be on here in not too long.
He gave us a couple hours of honestly the most intense education I've seen in years.
Yep. Really awesome, you'll see some high level breeders. You're going to see a very, very, very special episode. I'm not even going to drop a name. Just understand that my friend GRAMBO, the magic man back there, is hard at work putting together something super special.
And straight up, shout out to you for getting on a plane last minute. You got the call. And it was kind of like, hey, I'm leaving the country. I got to go do this. And I'm like, what? All right, dude, go.
But I mean, it was
a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's all you can say.
I literally got the call and flew out internationally, flew to Amsterdam. I'll give that little tidbit. Flew to Amsterdam last minute, and I was able to secure really amazing.
You didn't really post much there, but you were with some, he sent me some pictures.
I only let's just say I was sitting next to Mr. Jingles.
And not for nothing, you got to see the homie Soma.
Yes.
Soma had been sick. So
I literally took him back on his first walk from Jair's house to his house on his first walk after being in the hospital. He was on the boat. I'm giving some details out here. Anyway.
One last thing. Yeah, Gabe mentioned it. Head over to jugdealers.shop if you want to buy any nutrients. They're there for you. But also the merch section is coming up very soon. Gabe mentioned it. Plant janitor shirts.
On their way.
Not for nothing shirts.
Not for nothing shirts.
And we got the subscribers list too.
So there's and everybody we haven't really got.
I was even confused on this.
Well,
today.
yeah, but
Jerin gave me an education.
Well, yes, I did. We obviously have the normal subscribers list, which is the email subscriber list, which we will be putting periodic once we get our shit together. We will be putting out periodic coupons and probably at least quarterly newsletters out there, hopefully monthly. But I don't want to promise anything. And then of course we do have the Jug Club. That same thing. We're getting it all together. We've already had people signing up. Thank you for the people that are being patient and have signed up. Don't you worry. We are hard at work. There's just only so many of us. So till next time.
Yeah, we're personally addressing this. So.
Yes. You guys will notice there's home, there's samples, there's bookings, there's tabs. Maybe go to jugdealers.net and click around. You might be surprised what you find.
Click around. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Really appreciate you guys watching. Until next time, from the Jug Den. Peace out.